Hello everyone and welcome to this newest edition of Blitzkrieg. This is Remleiz from 40k Theories.
And this is Fiaura, and I'm really beginning to wonder about the Adeptus Mechanicus.
Yes, so let's jump straight in. We're going to look at the Crios battle tank. Now, the Crios battle tank, it fulfills on the battlefield the same role as the Space Marine Predator. It's durable and protected by interlocking energy fields, and its most common armament is the lightning cannon. It also comes as the Crios Venator variant, which replaces the lightning cannon with a pulsar fusel.
Okay, so, first off, this thing has no physical armor. It even says in its text it actually has no actual physical armor plating that protects it. Which is why we can see all of the gears and all of the insides and everything in the crew guy and the one person crewing it, who I'm assuming is an Adeptus Mechanicus, who's attached up there with all his cybernetic parts and everything, is completely exposed. It instead relies on energy shields, which I have no statistics or specs for, but there is always the problem of relying on energy shields in the fact that the Warhammer 40k universe energy shields, as I understand them, stop things moving at a certain velocity, but things moving slower than that pass through unharmed, which means for most units with melee shields, with shields, melee units are the biggest threat because they can just pass through the shield and then start beating on the object in question. Or you could possibly throw a grenade slow enough that it would penetrate the shield anyway. That much said, the firepower is really not known. See, what they call a lightning cannon, as it reads to me, is an extremely powerful laser that is then altered with electromagnets in order to amplify the laser and create a massive burst of directed energy. This, in our world, is referred to as an ion cannon. Which means that, yes, in fact, this particular variant with the, quote, lightning cannon would be extremely effective at disabling electronics, power armor, laser-based weaponry, other vehicles, all sorts of stuff. It probably wouldn't actually destroy them. Instead, knock them out via frying all the electronics inside. Which I could see being an Adeptus Mechanicus philosophy of fighting. You want to disable the machine and then turn the machine towards your purposes as worshippers of the Omnissiah, not destroy a machine outright. But then again, because it's also an extremely powerful laser, they can convert an ion cannon to actually amp the wattage and everything, and enough ion-based radiation will kill a person. It'll heat up metal and melt through it. It will even destroy fortifications if you ramp it up enough. Now, there isn't a lot of specifics on this because the quote I have is that the technical specs are a closely guarded secret. So no idea what the actual capabilities of this weapon is, but I do know this. If the energy shields come down, if you run over a landmine, if assault marines storm it, if you have somebody get inside the energy shield and throw a melta-based grenade into it or a crack grenade, it's dead. Everything is completely exposed. So, other than the shields, this thing has no defense. Granted, it is supposedly significantly faster than a Lehman Russ, which isn't hard to do considering Lehman Russ doesn't go as fast as most cars go down the highway. That's what I really have to say about it. It's way too overly exposed for my tastes. If it's got enough of those energy shields, it could survive in a firefight, but in a close quarters or an urban fighting situation, I see this thing as more of a hindrance than an actual capable vehicle.
And what about the Venator variant, the one that replaces the lightning cannon with the pulsar fusel weapon?
The pulsar fusel weapon is referred to in the fluff and for all intents and purposes for game mechanics as a multi-chamber particle beam. What that translates to is a literal revolver particle cannon or a minigun particle cannon. Brilliant idea if you've gotten it to work. Because the way particle beams normally work is for our scientific understanding of the way that one of these would work, is you have to gather enough energy into a chamber, hyper-pressurize it, and then let that pressure go out of a very small opening all at once, i.e. into a barrel. By using the multi-chamber system, they have solved the rate of fire issue of having to recharge over and over again the same chamber, instead firing a chamber and then rotating to fire again. It still has the same vulnerabilities as the original Crios variant tank, in that melee is going to kill it, landmines are going to be the bane of its existence, melt a weapon, any grenade is probably going to be traveling at too slow a velocity for the shield to stop. So it has its disadvantage in close quarters, but at longer range is a purely anti-armor, anti-infantry support vehicle. I don't think you could ask for a better weapon, because you've got the firepower equivalent of a high-powered las cannon with the rapid fire of a bolter. And that it's not going to be as rapid fire as a heavy bolter, but it's going to be rapid fire enough that it's going to fire every time you can pull the trigger. That much said, these, quote, main battle tanks are really kind of standoff weapons. They're not... I don't see them being a frontline weapon, and I particularly don't see them being an urban combat vehicle.
Okay, so next up on the list then, we have the Triaros Armoured Conveyor. Now the Triaros Armoured Conveyor is the primary transport of the Mechanicum, and its weapon systems, it includes independently animated weapons servitors. Now servitors are basically lobotomized cyborgs designed for one particular task, and it's also equipped with Volkite sentinels and a Mauler bolt cannon. And this thing also includes a reactor-fed shock ram mounted at the front, which is used to shatter and incinerate anything it contacts. And the storage bay can also be hermetically sealed if needed, which allows it to be used in hard vacuum space.
So, this is one of the first vehicles we've encountered that is a ground-based vehicle that has the ability to pressurize itself from the atmosphere. Congratulations, you're one of the first vehicles that we've come into that has anti-biological, anti-chemical warfare. You're getting close to being ideal to being able to fight Tyranids. The weapon systems, my understanding of Servitors is that they're not particularly smart or adept at they're used for tasks that are not supposed to be high intensity, or just the mundane everyday stuff that, you know, nobody really wants to do.
They're programmed specifically for one use, so you can have servitors designed for maintenance, servitors designed to be used as artillery, etc.
I don't see them being as accurate or as combat intuitive as a living person. I see them about on the same level as the Tau drones in terms of capability, which if you look at the Tau drones are not as accurate or capable in combat as actual Tau. But when you don't have numbers of people, they're a good replacement. The shock ram is interesting to me. In the fact that, while again, the quote technical specs are a closely guarded secret, the capabilities of this vehicle, however, have been revealed to us, I do believe, to some degree. I don't know what the shock ram is exactly capable of. I don't know the wattage or the amplitude or anything about how powerful the electrical current actually is, but if it's powerful enough to, quote, annihilate a person, you're talking several hundred megawatts being charged through this thing constantly. That is a significant threat to your enemy. It's also a significant threat against anti-tank rounds hitting it, because they would magnetize, the massive electrical current would instantly magnetize the round, and if the round was already a slight negative polarity and this is a positive polarity, it's going to attract it. But if the round was a positive polarity and this is a positive polarity, it's going to cause that round to deviate off in a random direction at extremely high speed. So as a defense, this is excellent at this is potentially excellent at actually deflecting incoming rounds, but it's also potentially harmful in that it might attract incoming rounds at the same time. So it brings a whole new definition to the term bullet magnet. But other than that, the armor is pretty flat. It's a again, looks like it's going to be relying on energy shielding to shield its sides, because you can see the internals from the sides. And that is not something you really want to see. I kind of think the Adeptus Mechanicus should have probably put some plating over that. Mines are going to be not very much of a threat to this thing, because the massive electrical current running through it is going to detonate the mines as it comes up to them. So while mines aren't a threat, again, melee units with a power sword, power axe, a melt-a-bomb, anyone who can get in close to it is going to be a huge major threat to it instantly, because it has, you can see all the mechanical insides.
All it's going to take is, Marnius Calgar, the Ultramarines, walking up to it and going, "I cast fist."
Quite possibly, yes. If someone walks up to it and goes, "I cast fist" with a power fist, you are going to wreck its mobility train instantly. However, its speed is slow. Granted, it can keep up with Imperial Guard forces, which I'm guessing is all they wanted it to do, was keep up with the Imperial Guard. But 25 kilometers an hour is abysmally slow for an armored vehicle. 180 millimeters of frontal armor is really nice. I'll give it that. That's really nice. I don't have any armor rating for the side armor. And the side armor, I'm guessing, is non-existent because I can see the insides. But I can't really truly get behind this, since the RAM may or may not help you against incoming rounds. It will probably detonate heat rounds in midair before they impact on you. I will give it that. Shape charges and high explosive rounds are going to get hit by the electromagnetic current while they're in air, and either their detonators are going to fry and they're going to fail to detonate, or they're going to detonate before impact, which is extremely unideal for an anti-tank round. That's assuming you're shooting at the front of it. If you're shooting at the sides, I would expect the first shot into the side of this thing to disable its mobility instantly. So there you go. That's but it's relying on those energy shields again. And again, I don't have specs for the energy shields, but I do know that the energy shields have to let people walk through them, because this is an armored personnel carrier. Obviously, you're unloading and reloading people in and out. They have to be able to walk through that energy shield, or they're kind of pointless to unload.
I just had a thought in regards to this energy shield. If this energy shield stays up, where it's letting troops in and out, then obviously this shield must react to a certain velocity, obviously, which is good for deflecting, high rates of fire, from like things like heavy stubbers, heavy bolters, etc. But if someone just casually walks aside and just, gently slings a melter charge.
Yeah, that's what I've been talking about.
That's just going to pop through the shield, boom.
Is an assault marine just walking by and just going melter charge, or a Tau fire warrior just walking by and going EMP grenade,
or a squat mole just coming out from underneath it.
A squat mole coming up from underneath it could probably actually just start mining into its underbelly armor straight into it if it didn't hit the shock ram on the front. Which I think would be quite the hilarious sight.
And let's be honest, it's not going to stun up to a squat Cyclops, is it?
No. Absolutely not. However, we do have a vehicle here that might do it.
Yeah. And before we carry on, I just want to point out, because I know I'm going to get a whole bunch of slack in the comments from the way I pronounce this word, and the reason I pronounce the word this way is because I'm English, it's the way we pronounce it. Next up is the Minotaur artillery tank. Now, the Minotaur is armed with 2 Earthshaker cannons, which is the same armament on the Imperial Guard Basilisk. In fact, this tank is also used by the Imperial Guard as well, although not as commonly these days because it's been replaced by the Basilisk. Now, we actually have tech specs for this one. It weighs in at 98 tons, has a top speed on-road of 25 kilometers an hour, and an elevation of 0 degrees to 58 degrees.
So this is the first time we've talked about an Earthshaker cannon, and that's because you generally don't send artillery pieces directly into battle. They sit back and support. First thing I want to go over is the Earthshaker cannon is a very odd caliber, 132 millimeter. You generally equip things in an even 5 number millimeter for the most part. The Russians tried it with their 122 millimeter and decided that wasn't really ideal. The English used to measure their cannons in inches, and stopped doing that and standardized to the millimeter system because they wanted to be able to trade rounds between each other. This truly makes it where Earthshaker cannons are by far uniquely ammunitioned. You can only fire Earthshaker cannon ammunition out of the Earthshaker cannon and vice versa. It requires its own ammunition, period. There's no flexibility for the rounds you could use. That said, the Minotaur has extremely good layouts of armor for an artillery piece. I say this, I mean, you're talking about a unit that is not designed to actually be involved in frontline combat. What it does have going for it, first off, is the front of the armor and the sides are 180 and 120 millimeters respectively. That is thick enough that even the Earthshaker cannon is not going to be able to damage it in counter battery fire. Which means that this thing is uniquely designed as the I'm not going to be able to be killed by counter battery. On top of that, it has an open top, which a lot of people will go, well, all you have to do is land a shell directly inside the top of the... That's a statistical near impossibility. In all of World War II, Hellcats repeatedly, which is another open-top vehicle I can relate to, repeatedly engaged during artillery battery fights, and the Germans only managed to actually land a high-explosive shell in 6 of them through the open top. It's an extremely improbable shot. So, taking that into account, the poisonous gases that would be vented from the rounds going off are actually just blown straight up out of the top of the vehicle. The location of the crew means the crew can quickly switch between firing positions and traveling positions, because when you're traveling you want to secure the cannons in order to keep them stable and not lose their calibration or their aiming settings. However, this thing is really slow. It barely keeps up with most Imperial Guard forces. This is not a Blitzkrieg weapon. Again, 25 kilometers an hour, just like the Tyros and the Crios. They're all dead slow vehicles. And it weighs a massive 98 tons. I'm going to illustrate this for you with another reference. One of the heaviest tanks ever built, the LeVay, only weighed 90 tons. This is 8 tons heavier than the heaviest functional prototype ever built during World War II. And from there, we just get lighter and lighter with our tanks because we realize that it's impractical to have 98 tons of steel trying to roll across most bridges, and particularly in Eastern Europe. The next defect with this thing is it has no actual depression of its cannons. Granted, for an artillery piece, you don't usually design them with the intention of needing gun depression, i.e. the ability to point downward, but that means that its self-defense capability is extremely hindered. If something gets too close to it, or if something is down underneath it, it can't engage.
That being said, however, it can also take additional armaments in the form of pintle-mounted storm bolters or heavy stubbers, and heavy stubbers basically being the 40k equivalent of a high-caliber machine gun.
Yes, which is great for self-defense. The other self-defense system that I see that it can take, which I would say is almost mandatory, are the hunter-killer missiles. You're going to need an anti-tank missile on this thing if it's going to be near the front line. Because if a tank sees it, most of the other armored vehicles we've gone over in the Imperial Guard forces have thicker than 180 millimeters of armor for a reason. A las cannon will penetrate that. So, if a tank sees it, it's likely going to make it a priority target. Which brings me to the big-ass cannon support on the front for travel. That thing is the best spaced armor setup I've ever seen. You have dual-purpose spaced armor in that they have the cannons rest on it so they don't lose calibration or stabilization settings, and if the armor is 180 millimeters thick, then when I took the measurements of this thing, that particular sheet of metal is 62 millimeters thick on full scale size. That is amazingly sturdy for a piece of spaced armor. As well as the gun mantlet is, while it says it doesn't have a gun mantlet here, it clearly has a gun mantlet. And the gun mantlet is almost 80 millimeters thick, which brings the total superstructure up to 260 millimeters of armor, which is equivalent to a Baneblade. It's well protected. The sloping is kind of okay, but the propulsion is exposed. It's really slow, and it completely lacks self-defense gun depression for its primary armament. Granted, the recoil compensation is excellent because the center mounting is kind of where you want your artillery's mounting. Either you want the gun as close to the center of the vehicle as possible, even if your turret is rear mounted, so when the gun fires, it's firing into the center of gravity of the vehicle. And they have actually made sure that they did that with these guns, is put it basically right at the center of gravity. It took about 45 minutes at the store for me to do measurements with a protractor and a balance device to figure out if the model actually supported the theory that this was completely center mounted, and it's about 2.5 degrees off of being right on the vehicle's center of gravity.